Today we have two special guests whose interesting and eventful childhood was spent right here in Macomb. Now, Scout, we'd like to hear a little bit more from your perspective, and where better to start than the trial of Tom Robinson. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience of watching it in person? The trial was surreal at the time. I didn't understand a lot of the things that were happening because I was so young, but I understood that Tom didn't deserve a lot of the things that were being thrown at him, and just the whole trial in general, I knew it was wrong. And one thing that I'll always remember Atticus doing, and that I don't really think I got at the time, was before he made his closing statement, he took off his coat and his vest, and then he loosened his tie. And I know now that he did that because he wanted to appeal to the jury as one of them and to be more on their level. And that was something that I wish I could have appreciated in the moment. At one point, Dill started crying because I think he was so overwhelmed, and I think he really felt the burden of Tom. And I think just the fact of what was happening kind of hit him all at once. So I took him outside. Jem stayed inside because he wanted to hear. Now, when you took Dill outside, what happened? We ran into Dolphus Raymond, who we were kind of taught and kind of just figured we were supposed to stay away from because he was like the town's drunk. And he was also married to a black woman, and they had children, which was very, very frowned upon. So we ran into him, and he had been drinking out of his brown paper bag that he always did, and he offered Dill a drink because he saw that he was crying, and Dill drank out of it, and I didn't know what to do. I told him to stop, and Dill looked at me and just said, this, it's not alcohol, it was Coca-Cola. And so we learned that all this time, Mr. Raymond was never drunk. He had just been drinking Coke in his bag. And he told us that he did that because everyone in Macomb kind of assumed that for a man to want to be with a black woman the way that he did, there had to have been something wrong with him, that he would have had to have been drunk all the time to make that choice. And so he kind of just let people assume that that's why he was with her. He didn't really want to give people the satisfaction of the truth that he really did want to be with her because he just did. And on one hand it showed the racism in the town and how bad it was, and on another it just showed, how little Dolphus Raymond really cared about their opinions, and he let them think what they want. And that was something that really stuck with me forever. So you go back inside and the verdict is decided. What was it?
Guilty.
Tom Robinson was declared guilty, but he was innocent. I remember Atticus just walking out and not waiting for us. It was hard to read his expression, though I'm sure we knew it. The verdict was wrong. It was a wrong decision, it was a wrong trial, but Bob Ewell got what he wanted.
Our father once told us that it's a sin to kill a mockingbird. That was the only time I ever heard him say it was a sin to do something. He meant that mockingbirds are innocent songbirds that produce nothing but joy. I think about that every time I think of Tom Robinson, a harmless victim to racism, and how wrong it was to persecute him.
I think that just so many people in the town just believed so strongly in what we realized and what we knew was so wrong. And it was definitely hard to just get along with everyone after that. And it was hard to just keep living the life that we had lived for so long in this small and friendly, or what we thought was friendly, town, and to just kind of go back to normal. It was almost impossible. But what would you have to say now, looking back on your reaction?
After the trial, I just looked at everyone in Macomb differently. They just believed in something so wrong, and they knew it was wrong, but it was just, racism, and that was was really hard for me.
Jem, this seems like it was a very major coming-of-age moment for you. I mean, most kids at the time, I would think, would not have that same reaction. I think most kids would have, been so conditioned to the racism in the town that they would have had the same reaction as most people, which was almost non-reactive.
Definitely, I didn't know what to think after that. I just couldn't stop crying, and it really has changed me forever. That was just such a hard time.
Speaking of Bob Ewell, how did he treat your family after the trial? Bob Ewell was as angry as he'd ever been. He'd threatened many times to kill Tom, to kill Atticus, to hurt our family. And at one point he even directly addressed Atticus and he spit in his face, and it was awful. After people learned that Tom was going to have a trial, did anyone try to interfere with that? One night, it was before the trial, Atticus was out by the jail, sitting in front of it, keeping watch over Tom, when a lynch mob full of all the town's men came up to him and asked where Tom was, and they wanted to kill him. And without Atticus knowing, we had snuck out that night and we saw the mob come up to him, and I couldn't help myself, but I knew I had to do something to protect Atticus, and so I went up to him and I just kind of tried to see how he was doing, and I just kind of made a lot of talk. He was very mad, especially at Jim, because I think he knew that it was Jem's responsibility to Atticus to keep watch over me. And I noticed in the mob Mr. Cunningham standing there, and he was the father of Walter Cunningham, who was a boy that I went to school with, so I recognized him, and I just went up and talked to him, and I asked how Walter was doing, and I didn't realize what I was doing, but I made Mr. Cunningham kind of stop in his tracks and realize what he was doing. He had a kid of his own, and here he was in a lynch mob. And so it was him who told the mob to go home, and that's when they all went away, and Tom was fine.
I'm still to this day amazed that Scout, her little small talk with Mr. Cunningham, saved the day. She stopped them from killing Tom.
How did people treat Atticus after the trial? Well, the whites of the town were very cold to our family after that, especially Atticus, for defending Tom, a black man. But the blacks of Macomb were incredibly grateful. They even one time delivered food.
I cannot even count how many casseroles there were outside our door.
But they were just so grateful that even though the verdict was guilty, Atticus still gave so much time to Tom, and he accepted, he defended him. And what happened to Tom Robinson? Tom was trying to escape from jail when he was shot over 15 times. And I remember it being such a shock, just his death. And I think it was Calpurnia, Atticus, Jem, and even Dill who went to tell Helen, his wife, of the news. And I remember Dill telling me that she had passed out because it was such a shock to everyone. Did Bob Ewell ever come at you two after the trial? On the way home from a town pageant, Bob Ewell tried to attack me and Jem, and he tried to kill us. And it was just feet away from our house, to the point where Boo Radley could see it happening from his house, and he came out and he saved us. It was so important because it was this recluse who came out of his house, for once in many years, to save us kids. And he killed Bob Ewell with a kitchen knife from his own home. And when Heck Tate found out, and he knew it was Boo who did it, it was his idea not to turn him in, because he knew that it would hurt him too much, just and he knew that Bob Ewell was, he was trying to kill us, and he was a bad man, and Boo was doing what he knew he needed to do to save us. And I think, for once, maybe even Atticus was taken aback by this decision not to turn Boo in, but, it was the right decision.
Even though we came out alive and safe, I was unconscious for a while, and I had a broken elbow.
After that, I invited Boo into our house. We kind of had this sort of unspoken bond, I think, between us, partly because I think he was watching us for so long of his life, and I think that he really knew us so well. And I just found it easy to talk to him. And so I invited him in, and we went into Jem's room, and I let him see him. And he was unconscious at the time, in bed. And Boo asked me if I would walk him home, and so I did. And on the way to his house, I kind of realized what I was doing, and I stopped to adjust the position of his arm that I was holding so it looked more like he was leading me to his house rather than me leading him. Even though Boo was so different from any other man I think we've ever met in the town, he still deserved to be treated with the same amount of respect I would have treated any gentleman, so he walked me home. Thank you both for coming out such a long ways away. We appreciate it, and we're glad to have you back in Maycomb.
Thank you again for having us.
It's great to be back.
Yeah.